So Moses has been up on the mountain receiving instructions from God about how to build the various items that will be used in their worship services going forward. The Tabernacle, which is the movable tent that is the center of their worship system, the location where they do it, and then all the things that go in it. The inner tent where the Ark of the Covenant will be, and the table, and the lampstand, the altar itself, a basin, all these different things. And the clothes the priests are supposed to wear when they minister. The turban, the robe, the breastpiece, something that goes over the breastpiece called the ephod. And while they are up there, or Moses is up there with God, the people down below are beginning to wonder what's taking so long. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods, or a god, who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him." So they're putting the credit for bringing out of Egypt on Moses, and they're saying he's lost somehow. We don't know what happened to him. He may have died up there on the mountain, for all we know. Aaron answered them. This is the guy that God is preparing, or telling Moses to prepare, to be his priest. And here he is giving in to this mob who wants to worship another god. They want to have something to worship. They don't know what is going on top of the mountain, so they want to make something for themselves. Aaron answered them. You stop that right now. Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing, and bring them to me. So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. Then they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." They have to have something to bow down to. So they're going to bow down to this calf statue and saying, this is it. This is Yahweh. This is the Jehovah. This is the God that brought you up out of Egypt. This calf right here. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord." So they're pretending that this calf is the Lord. They're pretending this calf has the Spirit of the Lord in it. So the next day the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. I don't know if these are the same kinds of offerings that God is instructing Moses to have the people give him, or if they're just making up their own rules for burnt. The rules for the burnt offerings and all that were very specific. We saw a little bit of that already when we got into the discussion of how to properly consecrate these priests. And as we go into Leviticus and we get the more in-depth instructions of the different kinds of offerings, they're very, very specific. There are very specific rules and regulations that went with each kind of offering, and they had several kinds of offerings. These people haven't heard these instructions yet. Moses is still up on the mountain getting them. So I don't know if this means these are actual burnt offerings according to the Levitical code, or if they're just making burnt offerings because that's what ancient people did and they're just following their own way of doing it, however much that matches the actual regulations given in Leviticus. I don't know. At any rate, they have fashioned a calf. They're calling it God. They're calling it Jehovah. They're saying this is the God that brought them out of Egypt, and now they're worshiping it. Afterwards, they sat down to eat and drink, and then they got up to indulge in a revelry. So they got up to play. I don't know what kind of revelry, but they're gonna celebrate somehow. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt." So even God is not taking responsibility for these people any longer here. "They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them, and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and have said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." So God is this close to disowning them. He's calling them your people, Moses, whom you brought out of Egypt. He is this close to cutting it off right here and now. "I have seen these people," the Lord said to Moses, "and they are a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them. Afterward, I will make you into a great nation." He can still honor his commitment to Abraham by building a nation out of Moses, because Moses is a descendant of Abraham. He doesn't have to necessarily follow through on his plans to make Aaron and his sons priests and all that if they're not going to be his priests. He has bound himself to the covenant he made to Abraham way back in Genesis 15 with the cutting of the animals and all that stuff. So he has to follow through on that covenant. But he can do that through Moses, because Moses is a descendant of Abraham. Now, I don't believe that God really intends on destroying the nation here. I believe he is very angry with them, but I believe he is saying this out loud to Moses to give Moses a chance to intercede for them, which he knows he will, and in fact he does. But Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. "O Lord," he said, "why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand?" So he's reminding God that you did this. "Why should the Egyptians say, it was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains, and to wipe them off the face of the earth?" So God is going to give his own critics opportunity to criticize him if he does this. "Turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give your descendants all the land I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever." We read that over and over and over again in the book of Genesis. We read that because Moses, when he was speaking it out loud, was reading it in front of the people who were supposed to go in and take that land and make it their inheritance. But now he's saying it to remind God of this promise too. "Then the Lord relented, and he did not bring on his people," goes back to being his people again, not just Moses' people, "the disaster he had threatened." Again, I believe that God never intended to actually destroy these people. I believe he was very angry with them. He will. Some of them will die. As we go through this section, a number of them will be purged, killed as punishment for this. So some of them will be destroyed. But I believe he is speaking these words of anger out loud in front of Moses to give Moses a chance to intercede for the people, which God, of course, knows he's going to do. I think it's very similar to when he spoke out loud to Abraham about what he was planning to do to Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham interceded for Sodom and Gomorrah. And in that case, the judgment went ahead and happened. Abraham's intervention ultimately ended up not being enough to save Sodom or Gomorrah, because the conditions that Abraham managed to get God to agree to were not found within the city. So, in this case, the Lord will relent from sitting on the destruction, although some of the guilty will be killed as part of the consequences of this. "Moses turned and went down the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand." So at the end of the previous section, God gave him these tablets of the testimony where the commandments were written on them by the finger of God. They were inscribed on both sides, front and back. The tablets were the work of God. The writing was the writing of God, engraved on the tablets. Now, we often think of these tablets as being, as having 5 commandments on one tablet and 5 commandments on the other. That's actually probably not what it was. Both tablets probably had the same list of commands on it. It may have been on front and back. Who knows? Nowadays, in our fancy way of talking about it now, we call the front and back side of a tablet or a document the recto and the verso. It's some Latin term. Basically, it means front and back. Of course, Latin didn't even exist at this point in time. This is 3,500 years ago. Proto-Canaanite, Syrian alphabet, or whatever it is they're using here. But nowadays, you would call the front and back of an ancient tablet or manuscript document the recto and the verso. Basically means front and back. And probably each tablet had all 10 commandments written on them. Front, maybe 5 on one side, 5 on the other. I'm not sure, but we often think of it as though there are 5 commandments written on one and 5 written on the other. Probably not. The reason why there's 2 of them is because these are 2 copies of the covenant. It'd be like a contract today. One would belong to God. One of these tablets would be like God's part in the covenant, his copy of the covenant, and the other would be Israel's. When these ancient nations made treaties or covenants with each other, they would make these copies on tablets or other surfaces that they wrote on, and then each party would take a copy of that covenant and store it in their archives or whatever. And so that's why there's 2 of them. It's not because 5 are written on one tablet and 5 are written on the other. It's probably because these 2 tablets represent God's copy of the covenant contract and Israel's copy. Now, Israel will end up keeping both of them. I mean, they're going to be in the ark. So the ark is in the tabernacle. God sits on top of the ark. So the 2 copies of this covenant are going to be in the ark. But one would be Israel's copy and one would be God's copy, if we're following the pattern of the other ancient treaty making, which I'm assuming we probably are. This is all very par for the course with ancient habits and ancient customs at this time of history in this region of the world. When Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting, he went part of the way up the mountain. He didn't go all the way up the top with Moses. But Joshua is hanging around somewhere in the lower regions of the mountain, somewhere between Moses and the people. So he can hear the people. Moses apparently couldn't hear them. He was so far up the mountain, I guess, the sound that was coming out of the camp didn't reach his ears. But it did reach Joshua's ears. So when Moses reaches where Joshua is, Joshua talks to him. He said to Moses, when Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting, he said to Moses, there is the sound of war in the camp. Remember, Joshua is the guy in charge of the army. That's what he thinks of. Be quiet, cat. Oh, no. Oh, I don't like this at all. Get down from there. Down. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Moses replied, it is not the sound of victory. It is not the sound of defeat. So it's not a war sound. There's not a war going on down there. It is the sound of singing that I hear. They're singing something. When Moses approached the camp, they're indulging in revelry, apparently. Remember what he said about that? When Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, his anger burned, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them into pieces at the foot of the mountain. I'm not sure if he was supposed to do this or not. It's not really clear to me whether this was something God approved of him doing or not. God will give him another copy of tablets, and he will remind him over and over again that Moses broke them. I'm not sure if it's something that Moses was supposed to do or not supposed to do or whatever. Anyway, going on. And he took the calf they had made and burned it in the fire. And then he ground it to powder, scattered it in the water, and made the Israelites drink it. So in the end, this calf would come out as part of their excretions. When they consumed this water that had the remains of this calf in it, they would excrete that out of their bodies, and that's what the calf would end up being. He said to Aaron, what did these people do to you, that you led them into such great sin? Do not be angry, my lord, Aaron answered. You know how prone these people are to evil. They said to me, make us gods who will go before us. As to this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. So I told them, whoever has any gold jewelry, take it off. Then they gave me the gold, and I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Moses saw that the people were running wild, and that Aaron had let them get out of control. So Aaron wasn't a natural leader, apparently. I guess that's why God chose Moses instead, huh? And so became a laughing stock to their enemies. So whatever it is they're doing down there, whatever sort of revelry and singing they're engaging in. It's totally out of control. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." And all the Levites rallied to him. Those are his fellow tribesmen. He is a Levite, as of course is Aaron. Then he said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each man strap a sword to his side. Go back and forth through the camp from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor." The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. Then Moses said, "You have been set apart to the Lord today, for you were against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day." Now, I don't think they were specifically killing their brothers. Like, okay, if you're, I think the idea here is that they're supposed to kill those who were responsible for this rebellion, even if they were their brothers or friends or neighbors. I don't think they're specifically setting out to kill people close to them. They're setting out to kill those who are responsible for the rebellion, even if they happen to be close to them. The next day, Moses said to the people, "You have committed a great sin. But now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." Remember we read about atonement earlier. He's going to try to cover their sin somehow. Maybe he's planning on offering himself as a sacrifice. I don't know. But he's going to try to do something to atone for these people's tremendous sin. Not all of them are in on it, of course. We did have some of them, that were not, that rallied to Moses. And when they ended up, punishing the ringleaders, there were only 3,000 of them of a camp of many more than that. So they weren't all responsible for this. But this is one of the things that Israel had trouble with, because they were all under this covenant. And they were held responsible communally, which makes it difficult sometimes, because if one person sins, the whole community suffers. In this case, there was a rebellion. Not everybody participated in the rebellion, but enough of them did to bring shame and sin on the entire community. So Moses went back to the Lord and said, "Oh, what a great sin these people have committed. They have made themselves gods of gold, but now, please forgive their sin. And if not, then blot me out of the book you have written." So even as far back as Moses' time, there is this idea that God is keeping a book. We'll see mentions of this book again in the future. Here's our first mention to the idea that God is keeping a book somewhere. And Moses wants his name blotted out of it if God does not show mercy on the people. The Lord replied to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now go, lead the people to the place I spoke of, and my angel will go before you. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin." And the Lord struck the people with a plague because of what they did with the calf Aaron had made. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Leave this place, you and the people you brought up out of Egypt, and go up to the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I will send an angel before you, and will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Go up to the land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go with you, because you are a stiff-necked people, and I might destroy you on the way." They might provoke him to anger again. They will provoke him to anger again. He might destroy them on their way. When the people heard these distressing words, they began to mourn, and no one put on any ornaments. For the Lord had said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, you are a stiff-necked people. If I were to go with you even for a moment, I might destroy you. Now take off your ornaments, and I will decide what to do with you." So the Israelites stripped off their ornaments at Mount Horeb. Now Moses used to take a tent and pitch it outside the camp some distance away, calling it the tent of meeting. They were supposed to have this glorious and attractive tabernacle tent of meeting. They're not having that right now. Right now they're just pitching a tent and putting it. And that tabernacle, by the way, is going to be in the middle of their camp. As we'll find out later when they actually do build it, The entire camp is oriented around it. This tent is not. This tent is outside the camp somewhere. This is not the glorious tent of meeting that God had in mind. Anyone inquiring of the Lord would go to the tent of meeting outside the camp. And whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people rose and stood at the entrances to their tents, watching Moses until he entered the tent. As Moses went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and stay at the entrance, while the Lord spoke with Moses. Whenever the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, they all stood and worshipped, each at the entrance to his tent. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. Then Moses returned to the camp. But his young aide, Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. So Moses is 80, and Joshua is his young aide. However old Joshua is, he's young at this point in time. So I guess this is happening before. I'm not sure. Like, this is another one of those things where the narrative sequence is kind of hard to tell. Is he setting this tent up now in the midst of this debacle with the calf, or did he set that up beforehand and he's still doing it? They're supposed to have a tent in the middle of their camp where God was going to take up residence. They're not having that right now, so they're having to settle for this tent outside the camp some distance away. But I'm not clear if he's setting that up now or if he set that up beforehand. I don't really know. It's kind of weird. The timeline doesn't seem to be straight in order here, but it's hard to say for sure. Moses said to the Lord, so now we're back to the conversation that God's having with Moses, which we interrupted briefly to talk about this other tent. You have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways, so that I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people. The Lord replied, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. Then Moses said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with me? Or go with us, excuse me. What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? So these people are supposed to be set apart, consecrated, sacred, made holy, designated for a special use, sanctified. But how are we going to know that? How are we going to be able to show that? How are we going to know that these people are set apart, distinguished from the others? And the Lord said to Moses, so in other words, Moses is asking for a sign. I will do the very thing you have asked, because I am pleased with you, and I know you by name. Then Moses said, now show me your glory. So Moses was wanting a sign here. Just like Abraham wanted a sign from God about how he knew he would be getting the covenant promise, or his ancestor, his descendants would, getting the covenant promises someday. Now Moses wants a sign from God. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But, he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Then the Lord said, there is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock, and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. One of these days we're going to see God's face. You turn all the way here to the end of Revelation, and we see this picture of life in the life in the future world after the consummation, after the second coming, after the final judgment, after sin is gone and death is gone and the curse is lifted. It says, this is starting in Revelation 22. No longer, for verse 3, no longer will there be any curse. Can't stop that. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. Moses couldn't see the face of God here, whatever that even means. This is a sort of language, I forget what the term for it is called right now, but this is the sort of language where we're taking human descriptions and applying them to God. Moses couldn't see the face of God here, but one of these days we will see God's face.